Good morning, everyone. So I knew this would happen. Like I started off with the videos and I look all like nice and pristine, and then slowly as I do more and more I probably will get a little bit more dishevelled looking as the time goes on. But yes, so today I was thinking of doing something a little bit different. I guess this was kind of the whole point of this channel, is to just allow these ideas or what it is that I'm feeling like I want to kind of, do to just change and move. What do you see, Nettle? This is, oh yes, I want to introduce you to my pussycat. This is Nettle, and she comes from Sligo, and I called her Nettle because the nettle is one of my favourite herbs. When I think about nettles, I think about nourishment and boundaries and protections, and I love the way they have a sting. It's kind of, they're kind of, proud, or I don't know, something like, but at the same time they're so bountiful. They're around all year round, and they're full of such good nourishment and so good for our bodies. And I had this lovely herb book actually. I can't remember the name of it, but I must actually remember the name so that I can tell people. But it's a beautiful herb book, and it has these beautiful illustrations, and I remember reading about the nettle in it. And it doesn't just have the physical benefits, it also has metaphysical and that type of stuff going on in that book. And I remember reading it, and it was all about how our ability to assimilate nourishment from our food, but also from our environment. So the nettle, that's what it helps us to do. It helps us to to take in nourishment. But anyway, so I'm going to, so this is Nettle anyway, and yes, she will probably feature in some of the videos in the future as well. And yeah, this is my we're coming from my bedroom in the caravan. It's just like another angle. But yeah, so this is my so this morning I said, look, I was reading a book, and I there was a story in it that I liked, and I thought I'm gonna put that up there. I kind of had my my nieces and nephews in mind for the stories, but hopefully everybody can enjoy them. So if you so if you're not interested obviously in stories, that's grand too, but just let me know maybe. But anyway, who cares? So here we go. So the story is coming from this book. It's called Why the Moon Travels, and it's by I'm going to butcher the name. It's Oein DeBhairduin. And the kind of description of the book at the back is: these haunting tales are rooted in the oral tradition of the Irish traveller community. Brave vixen, prophetic owls and stalwart horses live alongside the human characters as guides, protectors, friends and foes, while spirits, giants and fairies blur the lines between this world and the other world. Collected by Oein DeBhairduin throughout his childhood, retold in his lyrical style and beautifully illustrated by Leanne McDonough. So yeah, so it's these aren't my stories, these are pinched or told from this book. And I heard about this book from a lovely journal by called Aramid's Journal. And Aramid, there's a whole other story, actually a lovely story about Aramid in this. Maybe I'll tell it at another time. But so I heard about this book in there, and I really think stories and that oral tradition is a huge part of our culture, of human nature, and I think it's really important for us to try and engage with it more, learn stories, tell stories, so that we can kind of retake some of our power back with regards to our history and our culture, and tell it how from us, not from a book or from this person, and this person has a degree in history so they must know what our history is. We know our history, our bodies know our history, our blood, our bones know our history, and our stories can tell us our history. So anyway, enough rambling, let's get into the story. So there's some lovely ones in here, so let me know if you want to hear another one, or but this is a kind of a short one, and I just loved it. I'm kind of fascinated with giants as well. I'm fascinated with loads of things, but anyway, so this story is called Bees and Giants, and there's a little bit of a kind of a I think it's called gammon is the language of the, oh you can't see it, bollocks, ah well, and this is in gammon, it's bocht on Tom Glock. Could have absolutely definitely butchered that. Okay, so anyway go. So the story is, there were once giants who lived openly in the world. They were tall, beastly creatures, at least the size of 3 men, and had shoulders the width of a wagon. They were known for their wide, flat feet with stubbed toes and their thick arms. They had small hands with roundish palms, but their fingers were long and curling, bone-like, and tipped with sharp talons. They had flat, oblong faces with eyes of a gold, fog-like colour that matched their skin, which was corpse white. Their ears were large and canine-pointed, and the lower lobes rested on their broad shoulders. They carried with them the rancid odour of old animal fats, rotting hay, and stale sweat. Not so good. They were usually seen in a dishevelled state, with hair that looked like it had been brushed with the roots of a thorn bush. Soil, twigs, and leaves matted through their tangled locks. The giants wore clothing made from the hides of animals they caught and ate. They draped the sheets of leather over themselves, crewed holes in the centre for their heads, and tied about the waists with ivy vines. They roamed the lands, feasting on whatever they came across: cattle on the pastures, food in the storerooms of taverns, and the fish that jumped along the streams. But most of all they enjoyed the honeycombs from the nests of bees. They might leave an animal or two in the field, some fish in the rivers, or some food in the tavern larders, but they never left a drop of honey. Not only were the bees' nests crumbled to pieces, the trees in which they had built their homes would be torn apart in the frenzy of the feasting. The bees were timid, defenceless creatures, spending their days among the beautiful offerings of the woodlands, taking time to share in the nectar of the flowers and to soak in the beauty of every petal visited. They sang together in small, busy voices that moved in bliss-filled chorus through the woodlands. I think that's beautiful. Of all the animals that endured the terror of the giants, the bees were the first to gather in rebellion against the destruction of their homes. A call was sent out across the lands of Eire, and all the bees that could gathered on the western island of Inisheer. Above the home of an elderly, wise woman, the bees met to counsel each other on what to do. First, they decided to go to the giants and ask them to stop eating their winter stores. And so, a delegation of bees were assembled, and off they went to speak to all the giants in the land. They went eastward and northward, southward and high into the mountains. Then they went low into the valleys and wide into every edge and crevice of Ireland, asking for the giants to stop feasting on their homes. After a year, they returned to Inisheer and gathered again above the home of the wise woman. Their plea had not been heard. Second, on reflection, they decided they should go to the giants and beg them to stop eating their food. And so a new delegation of bees was assembled, and off they went to beg all the giants of the land to stop eating their food. They went to markets and courthouses, to the roads and boreens, to the shorelines and riverways of Ireland, begging the giants to stop feasting on their homes. And after yet another year they returned to Inisheer and gathered again above the home of the wise woman. Their begging had still not been heard. Third, on review, they decided they would go to the giants and demand that they stop eating their food. And so a new delegation of bees was assembled, and off they went to demand that all the giants in the land stop eating their food. They met giants face to face on battlefields, danced around their homes, sang high and loud to each and every one they met, marked each passage as they passed, and clung together to increase their hum and voice, so that the giants would hear their demand to stop feasting on their homes. And after yet another year, they returned to Inisheer and gathered, for again above the home, of the wise woman. Their demands had not been heard. Most now were tired, and took to resting on the roof, window ledges, table and chairs at the wise woman's home. Sorry lads, have to pause there to turn that kettle off. Make it. Sorry Nets. Sorry Mina. Now, where was I? Ledges and chairs at the wise woman's home, who had long listened to the plans of the bees. She, however, was not as battle-worn as they, and suggested to them a new plan. They should go to the blackthorn trees and snap off their sharp thorns, make their way to the hearth of the blacksmiths, and gather up the smoky splinters that fall about the anvil. Search the midlands for the spikes of the high-grown teasel plant, and then gather again on the island of Inisheer. By the time the moon's gaze had returned, they had each collected thorns, splinters, and teasel points. So the bees gathered and discussed their previous plans, how they had asked, begged, and demanded that the stores of their food would not be plundered, and how each time the giants ignored them, or at most waved their hands in wide swaying motions to cast the bees away as they carried on feasting on their homes. The bees gathered, hummed, buzzed, and reflected on their challenge, and in the end a single thought was formed. They would go into battle. And so the bees rose, bringing with them thorns, metal splinters, and teasel points, and began attacking the giants. They jabbed at their knees, dug deep into their necks, scraped their chests, and sliced at their frowns. They pinned back their ears and darted at their legs. They hummed in such a high swarm about their heads that the giants soon lost any sense of thought and mind. The giants couldn't endure the rise of the bees, and began to try to evade them. Some swam deep into the seas, while others climbed high into the mountains, taking refuge on the snow-covered peaks where bees did not care to spend time. Some stood at the very edge of campfires, so the smoke would be a deterrent, but most fled into the caves that were deep under the lands of Ireland. The determined bees followed those who fled into the caves, the underground warrens and grooves in the earth, jabbing repeatedly at any giant they found. The giants cried out and jumped high, beating at the roofs of the caves, so forming many of the hills and mountains of Ireland. After yet another year, the bees gathered once again above the home of the wise woman on the island of Inisheer, and reflected on what had happened. The giants had, for the most part, been chased away from the main lands of Ireland, and the bees could, for the first time in a long time, build their homestead reserves of honey. Since that day, the giants have stayed on the edges and coastlines and in the caves of Ireland. The thorns, teasels, and splinters carried so bravely by the once timid bees have now become a permanent part of them. A blackened thorn on their tails, not only a reminder of their rising, but a testimony to their resilient fighting spirit. So that's that one. Yeah, I know it's a bit long-winded or whatever, but that's that story, and yeah, I just liked it. I thought it was a sweet story. And so yeah, that comes from that book, as I said, Why the Moon Travels. So if you're interested, you can find it online, I'm pretty sure. And I will finish up there because this is going to be long and hopefully not too boring, and I want to go and make myself a cup of tea. Maybe I'll make some nettle tea. So okay, yes, so on that note I will say tar shocky decree agus tar oalia. Gurv mila mahogad agus slán. See you in the next one.